Welcome back to Us Mint Mysteries. Today, we're diving deep into a world that hides right in your pocket, the world of US 1-cent coins that could secretly be worth a small fortune. You might think every penny looks the same, but what if I told you that just one rare cent hiding in an old jar, a forgotten drawer, or your coin collection could be worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars? Our first coin on the list might look like just another common penny, but don't be fooled. The 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln cent has a secret that could turn what looks like a simple copper-plated coin into a collector's jackpot. Now, picture this. You pull out a 1988 penny. No mint mark under the date, just that familiar image of Abraham Lincoln staring proudly forward. The color might be faded, the edges worn down, even a few scratches here and there. It looks ordinary, right? But under the surface, this little coin hides one of the most fascinating and valuable minting mysteries in modern U.S. coin history. In 1988, the U.S. Mint was preparing new dies for the next year's production, the 1989 cent. Somewhere in that transition, a mistake happened. A small batch of 1988 pennies was accidentally struck with the reverse design meant for 1989. This rare variety became known to collectors as the 1988 reverse of 1989 Lincoln cent, and that's where the magic begins. On the back of the coin, if you look closely, the designer's initials, FG, standing for Frank Gasparo, appear slightly different. The spacing, the shape, the alignment all match the 1989 reverse design instead of the 1988. It's a subtle detail, invisible to most people, but a golden ticket for those who know what to look for. Here's the jaw-dropper. A regular 1988 penny without this error might only be worth 1 cent, maybe a few dollars in pristine and circulated condition. But if you've got the rare 1988 reverse of 1989 variety, even in circulated or fine condition like the one we're talking about, values can jump dramatically. Some have sold for $3,000 to $5,000 depending on condition, but hold on, in high mint state grades, with sharp details and original luster, collectors have paid over $25,000 for this tiny piece of copper. And here's where it gets even crazier if you happen to find one with a clear strike, full details, and that unmistakable 1989 reverse variety, verified by a professional grading service like PCGs or NGC. The price could soar into the six-figure range. Yes, you heard that right. A penny that could be worth up to $150,000 or more in the right hands. And here's the best part. Many of these coins are still out there, sitting unnoticed in change jars, coin rolls, or tucked away in old collections. That's because, visually, they look nearly identical to every other 1988 penny. Only a trained eye or a little magnification reveals the difference. So, if you have a 1988 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, that means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Pull it out and take a closer look at the reverse. Compare the shape of those designer initials, FG, and you might just have a piece of minting history worth a fortune. The story of this coin isn't just about money, it's about discovery. It's the thrill of realizing that something so ordinary could hide an extraordinary secret. Imagine showing your friends that you turned a single penny into thousands of dollars. Now, that's the kind of surprise that gives collectors goosebumps. And if you're thinking, come on, how can a single mistake make a penny so valuable? That's the beauty of coin collecting. Each mint error, each design change, each overlooked variation tells a story of human craftsmanship and imperfection. It's history you can hold in your hand. Next up, we're stepping back into the 1970s, a decade of change, style, and incredible hidden treasures in U.S. coinage. And one of the most surprising among them is the 1977 Lincoln cent. You might have hundreds of these lying around, but what if I told you that a simple 1977 penny, especially in fine condition, the one we're looking at, could be worth far more than anyone ever expected? Let's take a closer look. At first glance, this 1977 Lincoln penny looks simple. On the obverse, the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln stares proudly forward. The words, "In God We Trust," arching above, "Liberty" to the left. and that bold date 1977 right beside his shoulder. No mint mark means it came from the Philadelphia Mint, while those with the tiny D were struck in Denver. Now, 1977 was a special year for collectors. It came just before one of the most famous coin errors in US history, the 1977D double die obverse. This means some pennies that year were struck twice by accident, creating a shadowy doubling effect on the date or the word liberty. Imagine spotting a penny where those letters look ever so slightly doubled. That's your sign that you might have stumbled upon a hidden gem, even without major errors. The 1977 cent holds a fascinating place in US minting history. These coins were part of the last generation of true copper cents, made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. After 1982, the US Mint switched to cheaper copper-plated zinc, making older copper pennies far more desirable to collectors, especially those in clean, fine, or higher conditions. Now, here's where it gets exciting. A typical worn 1977 penny in circulation might be worth just face value, 1 cent. But start moving up the scale to uncirculated condition, and the story changes fast. Clean, bright red examples with full mint luster can sell for $50 to $100. Those graded by PCGs or NGC in Ms. 66 or higher have reached prices around $600 to $1,000. But the real shocker comes with the rare double die varieties. The most famous examples have fetched prices between $5,000 and $12,000 depending on condition. And in the rarest cases, when combined with an off-center strike or a dramatic minting error, values can skyrocket past $50,000 or even $100,000. That's the kind of penny that turns heads at auction. Think about that for a moment. A tiny copper coin minted nearly 50 years ago, hiding a six-figure secret because of a simple twist in the minting press. It's the kind of story that keeps collectors awake at night, checking their pocket change again and again. And here's what makes the 1977 cent so special to search for. Even a fine condition coin can reveal clues. Look closely at the date, especially the 1 and 9. Doubling often shows as a faint shadow just beside those numbers. Also, examine Liberty and In God We Trust under good light. If you see even the slightest doubling, you might be holding a treasure that's been passed over by thousands of hands without anyone realizing it. Collectors love this year because it represents the perfect mix of nostalgia and rarity. The Lincoln cent had already been around for nearly 70 years by then, and yet, the US Mint was still refining its design and technology, sometimes with small, costly mistakes that would later make history. Moving on, we arrive at 1978, a year that marked the very end of an era for the Lincoln cent. It might not look like much at first, but don't underestimate the 1978 penny. This little coin, especially in fine condition, carries stories of transition, rare mistakes, and collector surprises that can send its value soaring far beyond anything you'd expect from a simple cent. Let's take a closer look. The obverse still features the timeless portrait of Abraham Lincoln, calm, strong, and dignified. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands proud, its columns so finely detailed that if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside. It's that kind of craftsmanship that made these older pennies works of miniature art. Now, 1978 might seem like an ordinary year, but it sits right on the edge of one of the biggest changes in US coinage history. Just a few years later, in 1982, the US Mint would switch from solid copper to zinc with only a thin copper coating. That makes every 1978 Lincoln cent one of the last true copper pennies, containing 95% copper, and that alone gives it lasting appeal to serious collectors and investors. But what really makes the 1978 penny fascinating is a small set of rare mint errors that turned a few of these coins into absolute showstoppers. First, there's the 1978 double die obverse, where the date or lettering shows clear doubling, most noticeably on Liberty or the phrase, "In God We Trust." These are dramatic when you see them, with the letters appearing slightly shadowed or thicker than usual. A normal 1978 penny might be worth a cent or two in circulation, but one with this doubling error, even in fine condition, it could sell for $500 to $1,000, and in pristine mint state, prices have hit $7,000 to $12,000 at auction. Then there are the off-center strikes coins that were not properly aligned in the press. Some 1978 cents show partial blank areas or missing details, and depending on how dramatic the error is, collectors have paid $2,000 to $15,000 for unique examples. And the rarest of all, a double-struck 1978 Lincoln cent, struck twice with overlapping designs, once fetched more than $75,000 at auction. But here's where things really get wild. In recent years, sharp-eyed collectors began discovering transitional planchet errors, pennies from 1978, accidentally struck on foreign coin blanks or leftover experimental materials. A few examples struck on 10-cent planchets, thinner, lighter metal, have been authenticated and sold for over $150,000. Yes, one small penny struck on the wrong piece of metal became a six-figure prize. And the shocking truth? Many of these 1978 error coins are still out there, hiding in everyday circulation. You might find one in a roll of old coins from the bank, tucked away in a coffee can, or even in an inherited collection. That's what makes coin collecting so thrilling, the idea that your next discovery might be worth more than you ever imagined. Even if your 1978 penny doesn't have any of those dramatic errors, it's still a collectible piece of history. Copper prices alone make these older cents desirable, and in fine condition, they carry that warm reddish-brown tone collectors love. Over time, the value of these copper coins continues to climb, not just because of rarity, but because fewer and fewer remain in high-grade condition after decades of circulation. Now, hold on to your seats, because this next coin, the 1982 Lincoln cent, is one that changed American coinage forever. And what makes it truly fascinating is that even a worn, bad condition penny from this year could secretly be worth a fortune if it happens to be one of the rare transitional types. At first glance, a 1982 penny doesn't look special at all. Maybe it's dark, scratched, or worn smooth from years of circulation. But what if I told you that this was the year when the US Mint completely changed the metal composition of our 1-cent coin, and that mistake-filled transition created some of the most valuable modern pennies ever struck? Here's the backstory. For decades, Lincoln cents had been made from solid copper, 95% copper, and 5% zinc. But by 1982, copper prices were skyrocketing. The cost of making a penny had nearly equaled its face value, so the mint had to act fast. That year, they began producing new pennies, made mostly of zinc, coated with a thin layer of copper. But here's where things got messy and exciting. During that transition, the mint used both compositions, copper and zinc, in the same year. That means there are 7 different varieties of the 1982 penny, including both large and small date designs from 2 different mints, Philadelphia and Denver. For most collectors, keeping them straight is tricky. But the real jackpot comes from one accidental crossover, the 1982D small date copper penny. It's the one that shouldn't exist, but it does. Somehow, a small batch of Denver mint pennies was struck using the old copper planchets when the switch to zinc had already been made. Only a handful of these have ever been found, and they've rocked the coin world. Every time one surfaces in bad condition, even with heavy wear, this rare variety can fetch $10,000 to $15,000. In higher grades, prices, Sir, one example, authenticated by PCGs, sold for over $18,000, and another in near mint condition reportedly exceeded $25,000. But here's the jaw-dropping part: experts estimate fewer than 20 of these coins exist in any condition. That makes the 1982D small date copper penny one of the rarest and most sought-after Lincoln cents in existence. And in top mint state grades, collectors have whispered about potential auction values reaching $200,000 or more. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if your 1982 penny is copper or zinc? It's easier than you think. Simply drop it gently on a hard surface. A copper penny makes a high, ringing sound, while a zinc one has a dull thud. Or, for more accuracy, weigh it. Copper pennies weigh about 3.11 grams, while zinc ones are lighter at 2.5 grams. That small difference could mean the difference between a common coin and a life-changing discovery, even in bad condition. If you've got a 1982 penny that's copper when it should be zinc, or vice versa, you're looking at a hidden treasure. And remember, these mistakes happened when the mint was rushing to adjust machinery and use up old planchets. In the process, they created a modern legend, one that's still out there in pocket change and coin jars across America. Now, get ready, because the 1972D Lincoln penny is where things start to get truly strange. You might think you've seen it all, but imagine this, a penny with not one, but two faces. Yes, you heard that right. Two obverse designs. No Lincoln Memorial on the back, just Abraham Lincoln staring back from both sides. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But these so-called double-face error cents are real, and they've become some of the most fascinating and valuable modern errors ever struck by the U.S. Mint. Let's set the stage. In 1972, the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents. The obverse design, created by Victor David Brenner, had been used since 1909. Lincoln's profile surrounded by "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date below. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959, replaced the earlier wheat design. Everything about this coin seemed routine until, by pure minting accident, a small number of double obverse two-headed coins were born. So, how does something like this even happen? It's a minting phenomenon so rare it borders on miraculous. A double-face penny occurs when two obverse dies, both intended to strike the front of the coin, are accidentally mounted in the press, one on top and one on bottom. When a blank planchet is fed between them, it gets Lincoln's portrait on both sides, no reverse design at all. These aren't your everyday double dies or weak strikes. This is a full-blown minting catastrophe. And it's the kind of error collectors dream about. Now, here's the part that shocks even seasoned experts. A normal 1972D Lincoln penny in fine condition is worth a cent or two, but a genuine two-headed 1972D authenticated and confirmed by grading services has sold for $25,000 to $50,000, even with heavy wear. In higher grades, prices have reached the $100,000 mark, and some specialists estimate that if a perfectly preserved, high-grade example ever surfaced, it could fetch over $250,000. That's right, a single penny, struck twice by mistake, can rival the price of a luxury car or a small home. Now, it's important to mention, there are fakes out there. Some two-headed pennies are made by bonding two normal coins together, one obverse glued to another. But a true mint error has specific characteristics. The alignment is perfect, the metal flow lines are consistent, and the edge shows no seam. That's why professional authentication from PCGs, NGC, or ANAX is absolutely essential. Even in fine condition, a genuine mint-made double-face penny like this one is an absolute showpiece. The coin you're holding, the 1972D, in fine condition may be worn, but that only adds to its mystery. Imagine how many hands it passed through before someone realized both sides were the same face. That's the kind of discovery every collector dreams of, the quiet thrill of holding a mistake so rare it almost shouldn't exist. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. 1972 wasn't just famous for the double obverse error. That year also produced one of the most iconic double-die Lincoln cents in U.S. history, the 1972 double-die obverse. Known for its dramatic doubling on "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," regular examples of that error have sold for $10,000 to $20,000 in high grades. Combine that year's minting chaos with the existence of the two-faced coins, and 1972 becomes one of the most thrilling years ever for penny collectors. Next up, we're heading to one of the most talked about years in U.S. mint history, 1974. The world was changing, and so was America's money. But few people realized that a simple 1974D Lincoln penny especially one that looks ordinary or worn down, might be connected to one of the most controversial stories in U.S. coinage. Let's paint the picture. The year is 1974. The Lincoln cent still features that classic design, Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a symbol of American pride and stability. But behind the scenes, something extraordinary was happening at the U.S. Mint. Copper prices were skyrocketing. Making a penny was starting to cost more than 1 cent. Sound familiar? The Mint knew it needed to experiment with cheaper materials. And that's where this story takes an unbelievable turn. In early 1974, the Mint decided to test aluminum as a possible replacement for copper. Thousands of 1974 aluminum cents were struck as trial pieces, light, silvery, and shining like dimes. They looked nothing like the copper pennies we know, and they weighed only about 1/3 as much. But before these new coins could ever be approved, Congress stepped in and shut the project down. Most of those aluminum test coins were ordered to be destroyed, but not all of them were. A handful escaped the Mint, and that's where the legend begins. Now here's where your 1974D penny enters the story. For years, collectors whispered about the existence of a 1974D aluminum cent, a version supposedly struck at the Denver Mint. The U.S. Mint itself long denied that any existed. But then, decades later, a retired Mint employee's son came forward claiming to have won a genuine 1974D aluminum Lincoln cent. If authenticated, that coin would have been one of the rarest modern coins in American history, the only known example from Denver. Experts estimated its potential auction value at $250,000, $500,000, even up to $2 million. But before it could be sold, the Mint stepped in, declaring the coin government property and demanding its return. After a long legal battle, it was seized and vanished into history once again. To this day, no privately owned 1974D aluminum penny has been confirmed, but the mystery remains, and it's given even ordinary 1974D copper cents a special place in collectors' hearts. Now, a standard 1974D penny in fine condition, like the one we're talking about, might look dull, worn, and unremarkable, but don't be too quick to dismiss it. This was a transitional period, and minting experiments were everywhere. Errors like off-metal strikes, clipped planchets, and weakly struck dies have all been documented for this year. Some of these rare mint mistakes have sold for $5,000 to $20,000. Even when heavily circulated, there's also a known 1974D doubled die obverse where Liberty and In God We Trust appear slightly doubled. If you find one of those, even in bad condition, it can bring $150 to $300, and in high grades, up to $2,000 or more. But it's that haunting connection to the aluminum cent that gives every 1974D penny kind of magic. Imagine this. You're holding an old, scratched, copper coin, and somewhere out there, maybe locked in a government vault, sits its mysterious aluminum twin, a coin that never should have existed. Now, rewind to the year 1970, an era of bold change, deep history, and quiet secrets in the world of American coins. The Denver Mint was busy striking billions of Lincoln cents that year, each featuring the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But somewhere in that massive production, something extraordinary happened, something that turned an ordinary penny into one of the most valuable small coins ever found in U.S. history. The 1970D penny, in fine condition, may seem worn, maybe a little dull from years of use. The copper darkened with time, but don't let that fool you, because this year, this mint, and this coin hold a secret that collectors still whisper about. The 1970S and 1970D double die varieties, coins so rare that even seasoned experts can go their entire careers without seeing one in person. Let's focus on the 1970D Lincoln cent. While it doesn't carry the fame of the San Francisco version, Denver's mint that year had its share of shocking mint errors and near mythical mistakes. Some examples show strong doubling on the date and the word Liberty, with split serifs visible to the naked eye. Even faint doubling adds tremendous collector value. But here's the real plot twist: there are documented 1970 pennies struck on foreign planchets, including coins intended for countries like the Philippines or Thailand. These off-metal errors are the holy grail for collectors. They weigh differently, and look just a little off, and yet, that tiny mistake can turn a penny into pure treasure. One of these foreign planchet 1970 cents sold for a mind-bending $35,000, and that's just the beginning. There's also the near-legendary 1970 small date and large date varieties. The difference may look minor, but to collectors, it's everything. The small date variety, which shows a 7 that sits slightly lower and slimmer than the 9 and 0, is significantly rarer. In fine condition, even these can be worth $100 to $250, while high-grade examples graded Ms. 66 and above can climb well past $3,000. Now, let's talk about what happens when lightning strikes a 1970 double-struck coin. These occur when the same coin is struck twice by the dies, often leaving overlapping images or ghost-like distortions of Lincoln's face. One stunning example sold for $48,000, and another misaligned, broad-struck piece went for nearly $60,000 at auction. Imagine finding something like that in a roll of old pennies, a simple cent worth more than most people's yearly salary. It's the dream that drives every collector, that one magical discovery that turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. And here's what makes the 1970 penny even more special. It's one of the last years struck with that rich 95% copper composition before the mint began exploring cheaper alternatives. Over time, these copper coins have become miniature time capsules, heavier, warmer, and far more valuable than their modern zinc counterparts. Even if your 1970 is just in fine condition, don't ignore it. Look carefully at the date. Study the 7 and 0. If you notice any doubling, or if the numbers look slightly misshapen or misaligned, you could be holding something truly rare. And if it feels just a bit too light or too heavy, it might be an off-metal strike worth thousands. The most thrilling part: most of these incredible coins were found not by dealers or museums, but by ordinary people, collectors just like you, checking their pocket change, searching through jars, or sorting rolls from the bank. Next up, we have a coin that marks both a turning point in American minting and a mysterious legacy that continues to baffle collectors to this very day. The 1964 Lincoln cent. At first glance, it looks simple enough. You see Lincoln's timeless profile on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, and that deep copper tone that every older collector remembers from childhood. But beneath that familiar face hides a twist, one that transformed the humble 1964 penny into a coin worth thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars, depending on its condition and a few rare secrets. Now, let's set the stage. The year was 1964. America was changing fast. The mint was under tremendous pressure because of the coin shortage sweeping across the nation. People were hoarding coins for their metal value, and the government was scrambling to keep up with demand. The result? Over 6 billion 1964 Lincoln cents were struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, one of the largest mintages in history. But here's the mystery: in the chaos, a few coins came out different. Even in extra fine condition, a 1964 penny stands out. You can still see the crisp details in Lincoln's beard, sharp lettering on "In God We Trust," and strong lines across the Lincoln Memorial. But what you really want to look for is the 1964 doubled die, obverse a striking error where the date, Liberty, and the motto appear doubled to the naked eye. These rare varieties can send the value soaring. While a regular 1964 penny might only be worth a few cents, a true double die error can reach $10,000 to $25,000, even in circulated grades. But that's not the only surprise from 1964. There are also 1964 pennies struck on silver planchets. That's right, pennies accidentally made from the metal intended for dimes. These weigh less, sound different, and shine with a silvery tone. One of these wild errors sold at auction for over $125,000. Imagine that. A penny mistaken for a dime that could pay off your mortgage. Collectors also watch closely for off-center strikes, die cracks, and clipped planchets from that year. Each of these minting mistakes adds incredible rarity. For example, a 1964D penny struck 40% off-center, sold for nearly $9,000. While another with a major die break across Lincoln's head fetched $12,000. And here's where things get even more intriguing: the transition mystery. Some experts believe there may be experimental strikes of the 1964 penny using early 1965 planchets during testing for new metal compositions. These transitional errors are virtually priceless. Only a handful are known, and they tend to disappear into private collections. Even a flawless, uncirculated 1964 penny, with blazing original red luster and no contact marks, can bring in between $5,000 and $15,000. Depending on grading and color, red, red-brown, or brown are the official tones recognized by collectors. The redder, the rarer, and the more valuable it becomes. Now, here's a fascinating detail for coin enthusiasts: the 1964 penny is made of 95% copper, giving it a heavier, richer feel compared to the zinc-based cents made after 1982. This metal content alone has made collectors hoard them. But it's those tiny differences, the errors, the doubling, the foreign planchets that elevate this coin from ordinary to legendary. Think about it. A coin millions of Americans once carried every day, sitting in pockets, vending machines, and savings jars, now potentially worth a small fortune if you've got the right one. That's the thrill of numismatics. That's why every old penny deserves a second look. Now, take a close look at that 1974 Lincoln penny in your hand. Notice that deep, dark tone, the almost chocolate brown copper surface, dulled over time, but still holding a certain shine under the right light. You might think it's just a well-worn cent, nothing special. But what if I told you that hidden among these dark, ordinary-looking pennies are coins that have sold for over $2,000? Rewind to the mid-1970s, a time when inflation and rising metal prices were hitting hard. The U.S. Mint was facing a major problem. Copper had become expensive, and the cost of making a 1-cent coin was dangerously close to exceeding its face value. So in 1974, the Mint began an extraordinary experiment. They started striking aluminum pennies. Yes, real aluminum 1-cent coins. Over 1 million of these prototype coins were produced at the Philadelphia Mint. They were light, silver-colored, and unlike anything Americans had ever seen. But before they could go into circulation, Congress stepped in. Lawmakers worried that the coins wouldn't show up on vending machines or X-rays, and the project was suddenly scrapped. The Mint ordered every single aluminum cent to be destroyed. But here's where the legend begins: a handful escaped. A few of those 1974 aluminum cents were handed out to officials and congressmen during demonstrations, and at least 1 or 2 were never returned. Those coins became the stuff of numismatic folklore, coins so rare and controversial that the Secret Service actively hunted them down. To this day, only 2 confirmed examples have surfaced, and the Mint still considers them government property. One of these aluminum 1974 Lincoln cents was once valued at over $250,000, and its whereabouts remain shrouded in mystery. Now, back to your 1974 dark copper penny. Even those can hide valuable surprises, because that same year, both Philadelphia and Denver mints were striking billions of regular copper cents, and a small number of them contain remarkable mint errors and varieties. Collectors have found double die obverses where the word liberty and the date show clear doubling, and others with dramatic off-center strikes where part of Lincoln's face is missing or shifted. A 1974D Lincoln cent with a major double strike once sold for $8,500, while another with a broad strike error went for nearly $10,000. But there's another reason your coin's dark color might be more than just age. It could point to a unique planchet composition or exposure to unusual conditions during minting. Some 1974 cents have been discovered struck on bronze planchets intended for earlier years, or even on foreign coin blanks. These off-metal strikes can easily fetch $15,000 to $40,000 at major auctions. And here's the real kicker, the 1974D aluminum cent. For decades, collectors debated whether one truly existed. Then, in 2014, a father and son in California discovered one in an old coin collection. The coin weighed just 0.93 grams, exactly what an aluminum cent should weigh. Experts authenticated it, and its estimated auction value skyrocketed past $2 million before the mint claimed ownership and stopped the sale. That's right, one penny, worth more than a mansion, locked away forever. So, when you hold your dark-colored 1974 penny, remember, that tone could be telling a story. Maybe it sat in an old jar for 50 years, gathering patina. Or maybe, just maybe, it's one of those experimental planchets that slipped through the cracks of history. Either way, it's part of one of the most fascinating chapters in American minting, when the government almost replaced copper with aluminum, and a few cents became priceless treasures. Now, take a moment and imagine pulling out an old 1973 Lincoln penny from your collection. You see that deep copper tone, maybe some light wear around the rim, and a gentle sheen across Lincoln's portrait. To most people, it's just a penny. But here's the truth. This little cent could be hiding one of the greatest untold stories in U.S. mint history, a story that nearly changed the face of American money forever. In 1973, America was in the middle of a coinage crisis. The cost of copper was rising, and the U.S. Mint was desperate to find cheaper materials to make pennies. Sound familiar? It's the same problem they'd face again in the 1980s. But this was the first major warning shot. The Mint began running secret tests for alternative metals. Aluminum, steel, even bronze-coated zinc planchets were being considered. Most of those tests were done the following year, in 1974. But few people know that the groundwork for that entire experiment began in 1973. If your 1973 penny is in fine condition, it shows the signs of time, but still carries crisp details. Lincoln's hairlines, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse are all visible. That alone makes it collectible for its classic pre-1982 95% copper composition, heavier and richer than modern pennies. But here's where things get exciting and shocking. There are 1973 Lincoln cents struck on experimental planchets that shouldn't exist. Some examples were minted on brass blanks meant for foreign coins, others on aluminum or steel test planchets from the mint's early material trials. These coins are almost impossible to identify at first glance unless you weigh them. Aluminum versions are dramatically lighter, around 1 gram, instead of 3.11 grams. If one of these ever surfaces in public hands, it could easily command $100,000 to $250,000, maybe more. Even regular 1973 pennies have their secrets. Certain double-die obverse varieties show strong doubling on the date and lettering, most notably on the Liberty and "In God We Trust." These are so rare that most collectors have never seen one in person. A high-grade double-die 1973 penny once sold for over $8,500. And even lower-grade examples are still highly sought after. Then there's the 1973S proof penny struck only at the San Francisco Mint in limited quantities for collectors. While proofs are usually pristine, a few have surfaced with dramatic mint errors, off-center strikes, die clashes, and cameo contrasts so strong they shimmer under light. Some of these ultra-rare 1973S proofs have sold for $10,000 to $15,000. Depending on the depth of contrast and condition. But here's the real jaw-dropper: a handful of 1973 Lincoln cents were accidentally struck on planchets intended for foreign coins, including blanks meant for countries like Jamaica and the Philippines. These off-metal errors are among the rarest of all Lincoln cent mistakes. Imagine a U.S. penny struck on a coin blank meant for another country. That's the kind of mistake that drives collectors wild. One of these exotic errors sold for over $60,000, all because of a single minting mix-up. Now, Your coin, the 1973 fine condition penny with its darker tone and visible wear, still carries weight in the collector market. In its current condition, it might fetch a modest amount, but the excitement comes from what it might be. Because if it shows any signs of doubling, a lighter weight, or that telltale silvery or brassy color, you might just have a hidden treasure in your hands.